After failing my college entrance exam, I married Andrew and dedicated myself to managing his household for 40 years. Yet, when he died, I wasn't allowed to attend his funeral. Half of his estate went to his children, and the other half to his perfect love, Emily. All he left me was a sentence, and the memory of my stolen college acceptance letter. It turned out that I hadn't failed my exam after all. Andrew had taken my acceptance letter to curry favor with Emily. For 40 years, I repaid a debt I didn't owe. In a fit of rage, I stormed his funeral and exposed the injustice of those decades. My children, instead of understanding, turned against me. Dad and Emily were meant to be together. You ruined their happiness. If you keep making a scene, don't blame us for abandoning you in the countryside to fend for yourself. I was so enraged that I died on the spot. But when I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the year of my college entrance exam. My acceptance letter was still en route, and my life was yet to unfold. The familiar scolding voice jolted me out of my daze. Anna, we're about to get married, and you're still causing trouble. I had gone back 40 years, to a time before I married Andrew, before he stole my letter. Everything was still within my grasp. Andrew stood before me, rambling. It's just a bowl of meat. Will you die without it? I've told you. I only see Emily as a sister. Must you twist things like this? If you keep this up, maybe we shouldn't get married after all. Suppressing the wave of emotions surging within me, I replied coldly, then let's not. My simple response left Andrew stunned. Anna, what are you saying? I said, let's not get married. Snatching the bowl of meat from his hands, I glared at him and restrained the urge to lash out. A man who takes his fiancé's food to please someone else? What a coward. There was no way I'd marry him now. As I turned to leave, Andrew grabbed me in a panic. Anna, what do you mean by this? If you're not marrying me, who will you marry? Do you think you're Emily? Someone smart enough to get into college? Let me tell you, you'll regret this and come begging me to take you back. His condescension pushed me over the edge. I slapped him hard across the face and said with icy resolve, Andrew, let me make this clear. Anna, would never marry a man who can't keep his boundaries straight. Before he could react, I walked away, clutching that bowl of meat. The stinging pain on my palm served as a constant reminder that this was real. I had truly been reborn. In my past life, my grandfather had pressured my parents to arrange my marriage to Andrew if I didn't get into college. His reasoning? To repay a life-saving favor owed to Andrew's grandfather. Back then, my parents' hopes and my relentless studying were crushed by the false news that I'd failed the exam. Heartbroken, I drifted into a 40-year marriage with Andrew. I cared for his ailing parents, raised his siblings, and toiled endlessly to keep his household running, all while believing my sacrifices had meaning. It wasn't until after his death that the truth came out. I wasn't even allowed to mourn him, and he gave his fortune to others. He admitted that marrying me was only his way of atoning for stealing my acceptance letter. Even in death, he claimed he owed me nothing. I should have had a career and a life of my own, but he had destroyed it all. 40 years of labor left me sick and broken, and yet he had the audacity to say I'd lived a life of comfort. Remembering it all, I felt an overwhelming urge to crush every part of Andrew's being. I rushed to the village post station to check if my acceptance letter had arrived. Uncle Jack waved his fan and said, "Why is everyone so eager about these letters? Don't worry, Anna, if yours arrives, I'll let you know." "What do you mean by everyone? Who else asked about it?" I pressed, sensing something was off. Uncle Jack gave me a puzzled look. "Who else?" "Andrew and Brian. Of course, Brian's in the same class as you. Isn't he? Andrew said he's waiting to see if you get in. If you don't, he plans to submit the marriage application right away." "Oh, and Brian. That boy's got his heart set on you. He's a good kid. You know." I couldn't help but tighten my grip. Andrew always put on a good show in front of others, making everyone believe he was deeply devoted to me. In my previous life, no one could have imagined that Andrew was capable of stealing my college acceptance letter and giving it to Emily. Thinking about it, I lowered my head, and tears welled up in my eyes. "Uncle Jack, can I trouble you with something? From now on, please don't let Andrew take anything of mine. You wouldn't believe it. Today, He insisted on taking the meat my mom made for me to give to Emily. He said she's frail and needs the nourishment. And that someone like me, a rural girl, was wasting it because I couldn't appreciate good things. Uncle Jack slammed his fan onto the table, his face filled with indignation. What nonsense is this? What does Andrew think he's saying? So what if you're from the countryside? Hard-working people are the backbone of this world. That's your meat. Why should he give it to someone else? No. I'll go have a good talk with his mother about this. I quickly grabbed Uncle Jack's arm and feigned a pitiful expression. That's not necessary. Andrew's health isn't great. If he gets upset and something happens, it'll be on me. But you see, he's bold enough to take things in the open, and who knows how much he's secretly given away behind my back. That's why I'm asking for your help. From now on, if anything comes addressed to me, please don't let anyone else take it. Just think of this bowl of meat as a token of my gratitude. Uncle Jack hesitated, wanting to refuse, but after my repeated insistence, he finally relented. With this matter resolved, I returned home with the now empty bowl. As soon as I walked through the door, my parents noticed the bowl and were surprised. Anna, did you finish it all so quickly? I placed the bowl on the table and shook my head. No, I gave it to Uncle Jack. My mother was about to say something when an angry voice cut through the air. Anna, what's the meaning of this? Why did you give that meat to Uncle Jack? I turned around and looked at Andrew with disdain. Oh, do I need your permission to do something with what's mine? My mom tugged at my arm, trying to mediate. Anna, Andrew has a point. That meat was for you to share with him. Why would you give it away? I clenched my fists tightly but managed a cold smile. Andrew, why don't you tell them the whole truth? You wanted to take my meat to give to Emily, claiming we rural folks would waste it. You said she needed it to recover her health. Why should our family's things be used for your flattery? Andrew panicked and immediately denied it. You're talking nonsense. I took a step closer and shot back. If I'm lying, may lightning strike me where I stand. Why, Andrew, you're bold enough to say these things to me, but you don't have the guts to admit them in front of my parents. I continued coldly. Andrew, your grandfather saved my grandfather's life, and I won't deny that. But over the years, my family has done plenty for yours. We've given money when you needed it, grain when you were short. My dad even lost the use of one hand helping your father. Don't you think we've repaid that debt? Or are you planning to make my family pay for the next 18 generations? My words made my parents' faces darken. They had only agreed to this marriage because my grandfather, on his deathbed, had pressured them into it, claiming it was their duty to repay the Gu family's kindness. They knew full well that this arrangement wasn't for my happiness, but to continue supporting Andrew's family. Still, they had only agreed because Andrew seemed decent enough and out of respect for my grandfather's dying wish. If they had known how I would be treated, they never would have allowed it. Seeing my parents' expressions, Andrew hurriedly tried to defend himself. Anna, stop spouting nonsense. There's nothing between me and Emily. And don't get too smug. If you fail your exams, you'll still have to marry me. This isn't over. With that, he stormed out in anger. After being cursed like that, my father's expression grew even grimmer. Anna, if you truly don't want to marry him, I'll do whatever it takes to protect you, even if it costs me my life. Tears welled up in my mother's eyes as she hugged me tightly. My poor girl. How did it come to this? How could they treat you like this? I felt the warmth of my mother's embrace, but my heart was filled with a bitter sadness. Though my father's words were comforting, the reality in the village was that family honor meant everything. With Grandpa gone but Grandma still alive, her strict adherence to his wishes meant she might resort to dramatic measures, even threatening to take her own life. If I refused the arranged marriage, the gossip alone could destroy my parents' reputation, and I couldn't bear to see them suffer like that. I wiped my tears and reassured them. It's okay. As long as I get into college, the village won't have anything to say. My mother paused, startled by my resolve, then suddenly realized something. So, you gave the meat to Uncle Jack to prevent Andrew from meddling, didn't you? With something this big, who knows what tricks he might pull? My father stood up, gently ruffling my hair. Anna, leave this matter to me. I believe in you. You'll get into college. and I won't let anyone take what's rightfully yours. I nodded firmly, feeling reassured by his support. Over the next few days, my parents and I took turns visiting the post station to watch for the arrival of my acceptance letter. We didn't want to give Andrew any opportunity to interfere. Meanwhile, Andrew and Emily were facing difficulties of their own. Emily, as part of a government-mandated rural program, had struck up a relationship with Andrew as soon as she arrived. She avoided most of the physically demanding tasks, which Andrew, under the guise of propriety, couldn't do himself. Instead, he always pushed those tasks onto me. In the past, I naively believed his excuses, that he was just helping Emily care for her younger siblings. I worked tirelessly, thinking I was contributing to something meaningful. But now, fully aware of the truth, I refused to do any more of their work. Without my labor, Emily lasted only a few days before complaining of exhaustion. Left with no choice, Andrew had to step in himself. However, rumors began spreading that Emily was only in the village temporarily and would soon return to her studies. This worried Andrew, who eventually came to find me. "Anna, I know I went too far before," he began, feigning sincerity, "but there's really nothing between me and Emily. She'll be leaving for college soon. What could possibly happen? I only wanted her to help teach your younger siblings, Evan and Luke. You'll be their sister-in-law one day. Can't you make a little effort for them?" Annoyed, I pushed him away and said coldly, "Don't try to cozy up to me. I'd rather marry a pig or a dog than marry you." Infuriated, Andrew shouted, "Anna, you're such a vulgar woman. How could someone like you possibly get into college? Just wait. You'll see." I ignored him and hurried off in another direction. My mind was focused on something far more important. When I reached the tree, I let out a sigh of relief. I had arrived just in time. In my previous life, while working in this area, I had stumbled upon an unconscious middle-aged man. Thinking it was a small act of kindness, I had saved him and shared my name when he asked. I hadn't thought much of it afterward. Only later did I learn that this man was Stephen Parker, a high-ranking officer in the military. Andrew, upon discovering that I had saved Stephen, shamelessly used that act of kindness to advance his career, climbing all the way to a senior position. Despite this, he spent years belittling me, claiming I was useless and had no worth compared to the influential wives of others. He conveniently concealed the fact that my actions had set the foundation for his success. This time, I wouldn't let Andrew benefit from Stephen's gratitude. I knelt down and used the same first aid measures I had employed in my previous life. After a few moments, Stephen slowly regained consciousness. "Thank you, young lady, for saving me. May I know your name?" Caught off guard by his formal tone, I quickly composed myself and smiled. "Anna Lewis. It was nothing, really. I need to get back to work now." Before Stephen could ask further questions, I waved and walked away. I had no intention of using Stephen's influence for my own gain. From what I knew of him, he was a man of integrity and a staunch protector of justice. Someone like him didn't deserve to die here. My only hope was that he wouldn't allow Andrew to manipulate him in this lifetime. Having resolved this matter, I felt a weight lifted off my shoulders. In the days that followed, Andrew became surprisingly well behaved, and even Emily stopped flaunting her connection to him in front of me. However, as time passed, my acceptance letter still didn't arrive. Eventually, even Uncle Jack, seeing my repeated visits, couldn't help but express concern. "Anna, maybe you didn't get in after all." I immediately knew something was wrong and quickly asked, "Uncle Jack, do you know if Brian passed the exam?" Uncle Jack shook his head and said, "I don't think so, but someone mentioned seeing Brian packing up his things. Word is, even though he didn't pass, his family is taking him back to the city." Hearing this, a sharp suspicion hit me. In my past life, Andrew had stolen my acceptance letter to give to Emily because her family had refused to help her return to the city unless she got into college. How could that have changed now? Suddenly, another thought struck me. I turned back to Uncle Jack. Did the mail carrier just leave? When he nodded, I wasted no time, running straight toward the village entrance. There, I managed to stop the mail carrier just as he was about to leave. "Excuse me," I panted. "Do you have a package for Anna Lewis?" The mail carrier furrowed his brows, thinking for a moment, and then said, "Wasn't it already picked up? Someone claimed to be Anna's fiancé. I even asked around, and the villagers confirmed it." That moment, anger surged through me like a tidal wave. My chest felt tight, and I could barely breathe. Memories from my past life came flooding back, one after another, overwhelming me. Without another word, I sprinted toward Andrew's house. On the way, I passed several villagers, but I didn't stop to greet anyone. I burst into Andrew's home and immediately spotted him standing close to Emily, their behavior undeniably intimate. Without hesitation, I slapped him hard across the face. "Andrew, where's my college acceptance letter?" Andrew's face turned red from the slap. He was clearly caught off guard, as were the villagers who had followed me to see what was happening. "What nonsense are you spouting, Anna?" Andrew tried to maintain his composure, raising his voice for the crowd. "What acceptance letter? You must have gone crazy from failing the exam." Looking at his shameless face, I couldn't hold back my fury any longer. "You're the one who's crazy. No wonder Uncle Jack never received my letter. You took it from the mail carrier and even had the nerve to tell people you're my fiancé. You disgust me. We're not even married. And you have the audacity to call yourself my fiancé." The crowd murmured in surprise. One villager finally spoke up. "Come to think of it, Andrew did pick up a package for Anna from the mail carrier. But didn't he give it to her? Could it be that he didn't?" Sensing the crowd's doubt, Emily quickly stepped forward with an envelope in hand. "It's this one," she said nervously. "We've just been so busy that we forgot to give it to her." I snatched the envelope out of her hands and tore it open, only to find a blank sheet of paper inside. Andrew, realizing what had happened, smirked and said mockingly, "Why do you think I didn't give it to you? It's just a blank sheet of paper. What's so special about that?" Fuming, I gripped the paper tightly and glared at him. Before I could respond, Andrew's younger siblings, Evan and Luke, barged in and shoved me aside. "Stop making baseless accusations," Evan snapped. "It's just a blank piece of paper. Do you have any proof that our brother took your acceptance letter?" The crowd began murmuring again. Some villagers nodded, saying, "Yeah, Evan and Luke are such honest kids. Anna, maybe you're misunderstanding something." Even my parents, who had just arrived, hesitated. My mother gently tried to lead me away, whispering, "Anna, maybe we should go. This might really just be a misunderstanding." Seeing this, Andrew grew bolder and sneered at me. "Anna, why are you making such a big fuss? Do you hate me that much? What's wrong with you? You're just a sparrow trying to become a phoenix. Let me tell you, sparrows will always be sparrows. You might as well accept your fate and marry me. I'll submit the marriage application tomorrow." Before I could retort, a commanding voice cut through the crowd. "I think the person who needs to explain themselves is you, Andrew." The crowd turned toward the source of the voice, and their expressions changed instantly. A dignified middle-aged man was walking toward us, his presence radiating authority. It was Stephen Parker. "Little lady, we meet again," he said, his gaze landing on me. I stared at him, stunned. I hadn't expected him to show up here, and certainly not at this moment. Andrew, seizing what he thought was an opportunity, pointed at me and yelled, "So that's it, Anna. Now I understand why you don't want to marry me. You've been sneaking around with this man. He's old enough to be your father. How shameless can you be?" I snapped, barely restraining myself. Around us, the villagers started murmuring, "Who is that man? Anyway, maybe they're right. Why would Anna suddenly not want to marry Andrew? Could it be because she's taken a liking to this older guy? Who would have thought? She always seemed so obedient." I had reached my limit. Just as I was about to retaliate, Andrew grabbed my wrist and smirked. "Angry because I hit the nail on the head? Anna, don't forget it was my grandfather who saved yours. This marriage was arranged long ago. Backing out now? Impossible. And that acceptance letter you keep rambling about? It's a fantasy. Go on. Have your old man here conjure one up for you if he's so capable." Before I could respond, another voice rang out, sharp and commanding. "Shut up. Andrew, do you even know who's standing in front of you?" Andrew's face paled as he turned toward the source of the voice. "Captain Lee," he stammered. What are you doing here? Lee Minjia's expression was a mix of disappointment and anger. What am I doing here? The better question is, what on earth have you done? This young woman saved Commander Parker's life, and he came here personally to thank her. And you? You slander her the moment he arrives. You've brought disgrace upon all of us who've served with you. Andrew's face turned ashen. He glanced nervously at Stephen Parker, who stood stoically nearby, his gaze cold and unyielding. Commander Parker, I'm so sorry. I didn't know it was you. Stephen didn't give him a chance to finish. He raised a hand, signaling for silence, and turned to me. His tone softened. Young lady, are you certain it was Andrew who took your acceptance letter? I nodded firmly. Yes, I'm certain. Given how he's been entangled with Emily these past few days, I have every reason to believe he stole my letter and gave it to her. Emily, who had been standing to the side, immediately panicked. Anna, what nonsense are you talking about? I earned my acceptance letter through my own efforts. Are you trying to use Commander Parker to snatch it from me? Andrew quickly interjected, scolding her. Emily, don't say such things. Commander Parker isn't that kind of person. He turned to me with a pleading look in his eyes. Anna, Emily isn't lying. That letter is hers. I know you don't want to marry me, but you can't make things up like this just to get out of it. I remained unmoved, my voice icy. If it's really hers, then show us the acceptance letter. Let's check whose name is on it. Or are you afraid to prove it because you're guilty? The villagers, who had been whispering among themselves, nodded in agreement. That's right. If it's hers, just show the name on the letter. And wasn't it Andrew who's always sneaking Anna's things to give to Emily? If he went as far as intercepting her acceptance letter, that's a whole other level of wrongdoing. Seeing the growing suspicion in the crowd, Lee Minjia added, Andrew, the young lady has a point. If you're so certain, just bring out the letter and show us the name. It'll clear everything up. Emily hesitated, her face pale. Then she straightened her neck and declared, the acceptance letter isn't with me. My expression darkened as I asked coldly, what do you mean it's not with you? Where is it? Emily's eyes darted around before she replied, why would I keep it here? This isn't my home. Of course, it was sent to my family's address. My parents told me I was accepted. What? Do you expect me to bring you to my house to prove it? She sneered. If you don't believe me, feel free to search my room. See if you can find the letter. Andrew and Emily both looked smug, as if they'd gained the upper hand. The villagers glanced at me, unsure what to believe. But I wasn't about to back down. My gut told me they were lying, and I was determined to expose the truth. I immediately realized that Andrew and Emily had already planned their strategy. Commander Parker, being a military man, wouldn't initiate a search of someone's personal belongings without evidence. Even if he did, they had undoubtedly hidden the letter by now. After a long silence, Commander Parker's expression turned stern. Andrew, do you really think whether someone passed or failed can only be determined by an acceptance letter? I was momentarily stunned but quickly turned to him with hope. Commander Parker, do you have a way to prove it? He stepped aside, revealing someone who had been standing behind him, a familiar figure. It was Principal Zhang. I was overjoyed but momentarily at a loss for words. Principal Zhang, weren't you supposed to return to the city? What brings you here now? Principal Zhang patted my head kindly and said with a sigh, I was planning to go back, but Commander Parker came to me and asked about your situation. So, here I am. He turned toward Emily, his expression shifting to one of stern authority. Emily, must I spell it out for you? The student who was accepted to college is Anna Lewis. Not you. The school keeps detailed records. Are you seriously thinking of enrolling under Anna's name? Andrew's face turned ashen at the revelation. He couldn't believe the coincidence. That I had saved Commander Parker, leading to this moment where their lies were exposed one by one. Emily, too, was trembling with fear. All traces of her earlier arrogance gone. She clutched Principal Zhang's hand desperately, her voice trembling. Principal, the acceptance letter is mine. If it's not, I won't be able to go back to the city. I can't stay in this countryside. Please, let me have this chance. Principal Zhang pulled his hand away coldly. That's no excuse for taking Anna's acceptance letter. Return it immediately. Commander Parker turned to Andrew, his voice laced with authority. The truth is clear. Andrew, are you still going to shield her? Andrew panicked. His promising performance in the military had earned him Captain Lee's favor, and risking his career for Emily was unthinkable. Emily, give the acceptance letter back to Anna. If we have to, we'll just take the exams again next year. Andrew's voice was desperate. His eyes filled with urgency as he looked at Emily, practically begging her to comply. Emily stared at him in disbelief and shoved him away. Take the exams again? Are you going to pay for my tuition? Now that you've ruined your relationship with Anna, where will you get the money? There's always a way to figure out the money, Andrew said, his voice trembling with anxiety. But if you don't return that letter now, you'll ruin everything for both of us. Emily, spoiled by Andrew's indulgence, exploded in anger at his tone. She reached into her blouse, pulling out the letter that had been hidden against her chest. I rushed forward to snatch it, but Emily acted faster. With a furious scream, she tore the letter to pieces. The fragments fluttered to the ground like scattered petals. Unable to contain my rage, I slapped her hard across the face. Emily, have you lost your mind? The crowd was stunned into silence. No one had expected that Emily had been hiding the letter on her. In this era, where personal integrity was held in the highest regard, who would dare to search her body? Emily clutched her reddened cheek, her eyes filled with a hatred so deep it was chilling. Yes, I've lost my mind. If I can't have it, then no one can. Anna Lewis, you think you're going to college? Her words hung in the air, sharp and venomous. The villagers stared in shock, murmurs growing louder as they tried to process what had just happened. Meanwhile, I stood frozen, looking at the shredded remains of my future scattered on the ground. Seeing the fragments of my acceptance letter scattered across the ground, I felt as though my heart was bleeding. The pain was sharp and unbearable. My mother came to my side, supporting me with tears in her eyes. Just as I was about to bend down to pick up the pieces, Principal Zhang gently stopped me. Don't worry, Anna, he said firmly. I looked up at him, stunned, as he nodded toward Commander Parker. Commander Parker spoke, his tone calm but reassuring. When I first heard you hadn't received your acceptance letter, I immediately had someone contact Huaqing University to issue a new one for you. I personally instructed them to ensure it would be delivered directly to you and no one else. Young lady, you earned your place at that university. It's yours, and you will go. Tears welled up in my eyes, and I bowed deeply to him several times in gratitude. Thank you, Commander Parker. Thank you so much. My parents, overwhelmed with joy, also expressed their heartfelt thanks to him and Principal Zhang. The villagers, seeing the resolution, began to relax and offered their congratulations. That's wonderful. Anna can go to college. Our village finally has a college student. And who says no golden phoenixes can come from our village? Anna is proof that they can. In stark contrast to the celebratory atmosphere, Andrew and Emily's faces turned deathly pale. Their plan to steal my future had not only failed, but they had also destroyed their own reputations and prospects in the process. The villagers chose to ignore them completely. My parents, filled with gratitude, insisted on inviting Commander Parker and the others to our house for a meal. Despite their initial reluctance, they couldn't refuse my parents' warm hospitality. Soon, the group left for our home, leaving Andrew and Emily standing there, seething in humiliation. Once at home, my parents bought some meat and brought out their treasured wine, which had been saved for special occasions. They insisted on sharing a few drinks with Commander Parker and Principal Zhang. After the meal, my father, his eyes slightly reddened, looked at me and sighed. My daughter, you finally made it through. Commander Parker, you don't know how she's always said she wanted to do something great, to contribute to the country. She studied so hard, year after year. But that marriage agreement almost ruined everything. As he spoke, tears streamed down his face. I looked at him, exasperated but touched, and said, Dad, why bring this up now? It's all in the past. The important thing is that I've gotten into college and won't have to marry Andrew. Better days are ahead for us. Commander Parker patted my father on the shoulder and smiled appreciatively at me. Anna is right. Good things come to those who endure hardship. She has a bright future ahead of her. Coincidentally, I know some people at Huaqing University. I'll ask them to look after Anna while she's there. You don't have to worry. Hearing this, my parents finally relaxed. After the meal, Commander Parker gave me his phone number and told me to contact him if I ever needed help. As my parents busied themselves with preparations for my upcoming college journey, Andrew made one last desperate attempt. He came to me, putting on a pitiful expression. Anna, after you graduate from college, let's get married. Okay. His audacity drained the last shred of patience I had for him. Andrew, how shameless can you be? You told me yourself that if I managed to get into college, the marriage agreement would be void. Didn't you also say I was too stupid to get in, and that you wouldn't marry me even if I wanted to? Well, guess what? I don't want you. I never did. With that, I turned and ignored him completely. Desperate, Andrew went to my grandmother, hoping to use my grandfather's dying wish to pressure her into forcing the marriage. But when she heard about how he had stolen my acceptance letter, she grabbed a broom and chased him out of the house. You little scoundrel! Stealing my granddaughter's acceptance letter and still daring to talk about marriage? Get out! Her actions only solidified Andrew's disgrace in the village. The Gu family's reputation was ruined, and from then on, anytime any of them appeared in public, they were met with disdain and ridicule. The villagers couldn't help but gather around, pointing and whispering about the Gu family. Andrew's mother, already frail, became gravely ill due to the stress and humiliation. Andrew's younger siblings, Evan and Luke, who had once relied on their charm to garner goodwill, now found themselves shunned by the same villagers who had believed their lies. The children of the village even gave them the nickname the Liars, a label that left the two distraught and resentful toward Andrew and Emily. Previously, my family had supported the Gu family, which allowed Andrew to save most of his monthly stipend to give to Emily. But after everything that had happened, my parents refused to help them anymore. Andrew was left alone to bear the financial burden of his mother's medical expenses and his siblings' education and clothing. When he asked Emily to contribute some money, she flatly refused. Their arguments grew increasingly frequent and heated, nearly escalating to the point of involving the village leader. My mother, hearing about their downfall, couldn't hide her satisfaction as she recounted the events to me. I hugged her and gently said, "Mom, don't waste your energy thinking about them. Whatever happens to them is no longer our concern. Better days are ahead for us." I wanted to let the matter rest, but some people refused to let go. One evening, as I was heading home after finishing my work, I suddenly felt lightheaded. My steps faltered, and an inexplicable heat spread through my body. Instinctively, I leaned against a tree for support, only to see Andrew appear before me. "It's you," I said, realization dawning on me immediately. "You drugged me." Andrew's eyes were filled with malice. "You're right, Anna," he sneered. "You can only blame yourself for being so disobedient. Couldn't you have just married me? Why did you have to insist on going to college and humiliating me in front of Commander Parker? Do you have any idea that I was on the verge of a promotion before you ruined everything?" I gritted my teeth, struggling to stay upright, and retorted, "Don't think I don't know your real motive. You're hoping my parents will continue supporting your miserable family if I marry you. Tell me, how much of your monthly stipend do you actually spend on your family?" Andrew let out a cold laugh. "So what? Your grandfather's dying wish was that you'd marry me. Your father's injured hand and our engagement were all part of your family's debt to us. If anything, your whole family owes us. We could have had a perfectly fine marriage if you hadn't forced my hand." I turned and tried to run, but Emily suddenly appeared, shoving me to the ground. "Why are you wasting your breath on her?" she said to Andrew. "Just get it over with already." I glared at Emily, my voice trembling with anger. "Emily, why are you helping Andrew? You've ruined my life. Do you think I'll let you get away with it?" Emily crouched down beside me, her expression twisted with malice. "Anna, just accept your fate and stay here. Get married and stop dreaming about a better future." I grabbed at the grass beneath me, locking eyes with Andrew. "If you do this, I'll tell Commander Parker. Don't think for a second you'll keep your position in the military." Emily laughed mockingly and leaned in to pat my face condescendingly. Do you really think we didn't plan for that? Andrew's had the same drug as you. When people find out, we'll just say it was an accident. Two kids playing around and accidentally drinking drugged water. Who's going to believe your side of the story then? The only thing people will see is you compromising your reputation. Alone with a man. If you don't marry, you can look forward to being thrown into the village's punishment barrel for disgracing your family. The fire raging in my body felt like it was burning through every drop of water in my veins, boiling my blood. Desperate to stay lucid, I bit down hard on my lip, the sharp pain helping me cling to my sanity. Andrew, however, was already losing control. His eyes clouded with a mix of confusion and unrestrained lust. Emily sat back on her heels, smirking at me triumphantly. Don't bother hoping anyone will come to save you, Anna. She gloated. I made sure everyone was sent away. Bite your lip until it bleeds. Scream until your voice goes hoarse. It won't change anything. You'll spend the rest of your life stuck here. Emily's crazed laughter echoed in my ears, and for a moment, it reminded me of her smugness at Andrew's funeral in my previous life. She looked youthful, elegant, and full of life, so different from my worn-down, near-insane self after 40 years of marriage to Andrew. I vividly remembered how she had approached me then, her eyes gleaming with triumph as she taunted me. Anna, she had said, what did 40 years of marriage to Andrew get you? He only married you to have a live-in mate who could care for his parents, raise his siblings, and manage his household. Me? I've lived a life of comfort and ease. You, on the other hand, were born to serve others, while I was meant to be cherished. Honestly, I should thank you for letting me and Andrew enjoy so many good years together. I had trembled with rage, raising my hand to slap her, but my own children pushed me to the ground. Mom, Dad and Emily were meant to be. Why can't you accept that? My daughter had sneered. Mom, have you looked at yourself in the mirror? You're a disgrace. You don't deserve to call yourself my mother. They stood with Emily, the person who had destroyed my life, their words stabbing into the most vulnerable parts of my heart. I had died of sheer anger and heartbreak that day, my final moments haunted by their disdain as they grumbled about how my death was an inconvenience. But in this life, I had no intention of letting that tragedy repeat itself. I turned my head to look at Andrew, whose eyes were now filled with an uncontrollable frenzy as he stumbled toward me. My gaze shifted to the rock lying near Emily's feet. A surge of strength coursed through my body, fueled by desperation and determination. Just as Andrew reached for me, I grabbed the rock and swung it with all my might, striking Emily's head. She collapsed to the ground, dazed, summoning every ounce of willpower. I scrambled to my feet. Andrew, now completely unhinged, turned his attention to Emily. He lunged at her, clawing at her clothes. Emily, momentarily stunned by the blow, quickly regained her senses and clutched at her clothing. Andrew, look at me, she screamed. I'm not Anna. Let me go. First, she tried to reason with him, but the effects of the drug had stripped Andrew of all logic. Their earlier scheme to use a high dose for their performance had backfired, leaving him uncontrollable. His military training gave him the strength to overpower her easily. Emily's panic escalated, and she began crying and screaming for help. Anna, please save me, she begged, tears streaming down her face. I was wrong. I'll never hurt you again. Please, I'm begging you. I picked up the rock once more but didn't throw it this time. Instead, I let it drop to the ground. Hope flashed across Emily's face as she scrambled toward the rock, likely intending to knock Andrew unconscious. But just as her fingers grazed it, Andrew yanked her back and tore her clothes. I turned away, blocking out the sound of her screams and curses as I walked step by step toward the other side of the field. When I finally reached home, my strength gave out. I plunged myself into the water barrel, trying to cool the fire raging inside me. The water felt like a temporary reprieve, quelling the unbearable heat and pain. As my vision blurred, I saw my mother rushing toward me, dropping her tools in alarm. Don't tell anyone, I murmured before losing consciousness. When I came to, I was lying in bed, with my parents sitting beside me, their faces full of worry. My mother clutched my hand tightly, relief washing over her as she said, "You're awake. Thank goodness." My father sighed deeply, his eyes red from worry. You scared us. Anna, But it's okay now. You're okay. I forced a weak smile and said to my parents, I'm sorry for worrying you. My mom shook her head, gently stroking my hair. It's Andrew and Emily again, isn't it? Before I could respond, my dad spoke up. Andrew and Emily were caught in the woods, messing around. From what I heard, they couldn't even be separated when people found them. Wasn't that area near the worksite where you've been going? I nodded, then recounted everything that had happened to my parents. When I finished, my mom pulled me into her arms, her voice trembling with anger. Those two animals just won't leave our Anna alone. My dad looked at me with concern. Anna, they might try to blame you for this. Maybe it's better if you go stay with your grandmother for a while. Your mom and I can handle things here. I shook my head firmly. There's no escaping this. If I leave now, it'll only confirm their lies. As if on cue, we heard loud voices outside the house. Anna Lewis, get out here. I quickly dressed and went to the door with my parents. Outside, I saw Andrew and Emily flanked by Andrew's parents, who rarely showed up in public, along with a crowd of curious villagers eager to watch the drama unfold. The moment she saw me, Andrew's mother began shouting insults. Anna, you little tramp. How dare you set up my son? My mom, already furious, charged forward. She grabbed Andrew's mother by the hair and slapped her hard across the face twice. Who are you calling filthy? Your son's mess has nothing to do with my daughter. Say one more word, and I'll tear that mouth of yours apart. Andrew tried to intervene, but my dad blocked him, standing firm. Andrew, weakened by the drug's lingering effects, was no match for my parents. Some villagers quickly stepped in to separate everyone, urging, let's talk this out. No need to fight like this. Andrew glared at me with hatred. Anna, how dare you drug me and Emily? Do you have any proof to deny it? I smirked coldly and replied, proof? Let's see what the kid has to say. Andrew grabbed a timid boy, young Billy, and shoved him forward. Billy, tell them who told you to bring the water to me and Emily. Billy hesitated, stealing a nervous glance at me, before nodding and whispering, it was her. Anna told me to bring the water to Andrew and Emily. The crowd erupted in murmurs of shock and disapproval, their eyes filled with doubt and disdain as they turned toward me. I laughed mockingly. Billy, you're saying I gave you the drugged water? Then tell me, what did I give you to convince you to do it? Billy straightened his back and quickly replied, at the hill near the back. You gave me a piece of candy and told me it was just to help Andrew and Emily quench their thirst. I didn't know it had anything harmful in it. I stared at him, pressing on. What candy? Show it to us. Andrew, growing desperate, interjected. The candy's long gone. Anna, are you still trying to deny it? Ignoring him, I placed a firm hand on Billy's shoulder and lowered my voice. Billy, if you ate the candy, you must still have the wrapper, right? And you mentioned the hill. But you didn't say when it happened. Was it yesterday at dinner? Or the day before at lunch? Remember, kids who lie get eaten by monsters. I made a scary face, and Billy immediately started crying, pulling a crumpled candy wrapper from his pocket. It was this one. It was yesterday at dinner. I picked up the wrapper and turned to Andrew, holding it up. This candy looks familiar, doesn't it? Andrew, didn't you bring it back yourself? Your siblings, Evan and Luke, even bragged about it in the village, saying it was only for Emily and them, not for anyone else. Besides, yesterday at dinner, I was busy helping Mrs. Lou move things. Andrew, are you seriously trying to pin your disgusting schemes on me? Seeing things take a turn, Mrs. Lou, Billy's mother, angrily demanded, Billy, tell the truth. Who told you to drug the water? Terrified, Billy trembled and stammered. It was Andrew. He told me to give the water to Anna. Billy sobbed, trembling. But I really didn't know there was anything in it. Andrew said I was hurting people, and threatened to take me to the police if I didn't help him. The truth was finally out. Billy's mother, Mrs. Lou, stormed toward Andrew and Emily in a rage. You shameless scoundrels. Not only did you harm others, but you also dragged my son into it? Do you think I won't stand up to you? Andrew's parents tried to intervene, but Mrs. Lou was too quick and scratched their faces in the process. The situation spiraled further out of control. leaving the Gu family utterly humiliated. As for Emily, her reputation was completely ruined. With no other choice, she was forced to marry Andrew. Her parents, who had initially hoped to marry her off for a hefty dowry, were furious to learn she hadn't passed her college entrance exam and had also lost her virtue to Andrew. They severed all ties with her in anger. Andrew didn't want to take responsibility, but Emily used the threat of reporting him to force him into applying for a marriage certificate. Their wedding was an ugly affair. Andrew's mother tried to put Emily in her place, but Emily, never one to endure humiliation, argued back publicly, turning the ceremony into a shouting match. I didn't witness their wedding, though. On that day, my parents were accompanying me to the train station to send me off to college. Arriving at the university I had dreamed of for 2 lifetimes, I cherished every moment. I threw myself into my studies, never wasting a single opportunity to improve myself. When the reform and opening up policy gained momentum, I seized the chance to enter the business world. Before long, I earned my first significant profit, and my ventures continued to grow. I bought a house in the city and planned to bring my family to live with me. My grandmother, however, insisted on staying in the countryside, so I could only bring my parents to the city. It wasn't until 10 years later, after my grandmother passed away, that I returned to the village for her funeral. During that visit, I heard about Andrew and Emily's current situation. Andrew's mother, frail and in poor health, had left all the household chores to Emily. Spoiled and lazy, Emily refused to lift a finger, especially after becoming pregnant, delegating everything to Andrew's younger siblings, Evan and Luke. One day, while boiling water, they accidentally tipped over a pot of scalding water. Evan's hand was broken, and Luke suffered severe burns on her face, leaving her disfigured. When Andrew found out, he and Emily had a heated argument that escalated into a physical fight. Fed up with Andrew's mother's constant criticism and Andrew's lack of responsibility, Emily sent a letter of complaint that got Andrew expelled from the military. Forced to return to the village, Andrew struggled to find stable work. Their relationship only worsened. In their endless blame shifting, Andrew's mother passed away. Evan left home without a word, while Luke, unable to find a suitable match due to her scars, married a widowed butcher from a neighboring village and cut ties with her family. Why couldn't they have just lived a simple and honest life? Mrs. Liu, the neighbor, sighed as she recounted their story. I even heard Andrew was recently diagnosed with cancer. I smiled faintly at Mrs. Liu. Who knows? After finishing my grandmother's funeral arrangements, I prepared to leave the village. Just as I was about to get into the car, Andrew appeared, blocking my path. His hair was streaked with gray, and he looked far older than his years. Yet his eyes gleamed with excitement. Anna, he called out. You've been reborn, haven't you? I was wrong in our past life. Let's make things right this time. Emily was never good enough for me. She's vain and shallow. Nothing compared to you. My bodyguard immediately stepped between us, keeping him at bay. Covering my nose in disgust, I said, where did this lunatic come from? Eureka. Stay away from me. Andrew froze, stunned. Those were the exact words he had once said to me in our past life, mocking me for what he called the stench of a country girl. He had scorned me for years, never realizing that the foul smell he despised wasn't mine, but the rot of his own decaying soul. Ignoring his desperate shouts, I got into the car. Andrew had been reborn, but just in time to face the miserable end that had always been his true fate. As the car started, the forsythias along the roadside were in full bloom. My spring was just beginning.